who is having so much. I feel so bad for her. She's for years has been struggling with health issues, and she eats so good. Right now she can't eat hardly anything. She can't have meat because if it's been aged at all, she can't eat that. She can't eat, you know, anything that would help your gut, as far as like sauerkraut and all that stuff, because she has histamine issues and methylation issues. So, and she can't take probiotics. So could she take the spore probiotic?
Typically, people with histamine issues do really well on the spores because spores don't produce histamine. And a lot of times people who have an overabundance of histamine are likely dealing with chronic infections. So histamine is a signaling molecule in the body, right? It's really important in many different ways. One is it's a way for your microbiome to signal to your immune system that there's an infection present. So your microbiome produces histamine, it produces taurine, and it uses those compounds as a way to signal to your immune system that, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to here.
And start healing.
Start healing. Okay. So a lot of times histamine intolerance or overabundance of histamine could mean that they have a chronic infection going on in their system.
And they may not know it.
And they may not know it. It could be chronic Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, chronic rotavirus, something that they've been exposed to some time ago that's still there. And because their immune system and their gut is weak to begin with, it can take hold and remain there for a long period of time. So something she should try is looking at upregulating some of her immune response. So looking if she can handle certain mushroom extracts, those can really help with like reishi extract, and you know, there's all of these mushroom extracts that you can buy online that are to upregulate the immune system. Anything with beta-glucan, high levels of beta-glucan in it. There are mushroom beta-glucans, there are barley beta-glucans. Beta-glucans do a great job of upregulating the immune system to be able to deal with viruses and other chronic infections. There's a product I love and I take all the time. It's called Epicor, E-P-I-C-O-R. It's actually a yeast extract that has really strong clinical data on upregulating the immune system. In fact, the way this was discovered is really kind of cool. It's a production plant in Iowa that's been making this yeast extract for a while. They started using it decades ago in dairy cows and other types of farm animals, because they found that when they add this to the feed, it dramatically improves the health of the animal. And then as it turns out, they figured out that the people that worked in the plant where it was being made compared to the people that worked in the office where it wasn't present, the people in the plant had dramatically fewer sick days used than people in the office.
Wow. Right?
And that was very noticeable to their HR department. And that actually became a news story. You can actually Google this news story and look at the various news stories where the news reporters are going into the plant and going, you know, oh, there's something interesting happening in the plant where nobody here gets sick, and yet in the office, everyone seems to get the regular amount of sickness. And then finally, they started doing clinical trials in humans on that product and found that to be really immune protective.
So where do you get that?
I buy it online. It's called Epicor. It's a big bottle. You take 2 caps a day. For people with histamine issues, it typically means they've got some sort of immune dysfunction. They've likely got some sort of chronic infection. So, you know, you can address that part of it first. If you can tolerate the things like the beta-glucan extracts, the mushroom extracts, high doses of vitamin C. I take a Vitality C, it's called. Okay. It's got D-ribose and other things in it that help you absorb the C a little bit better. It comes in a tub or little packets. And those are what I take because I travel so much. I'm flying in planes, which is a really bad place for your immune system because, of course, you got the recycled air, you've got the high altitude, the dehydration, the jet fuel, the radiation, all the stuff you get exposed to. And I'm in planes 6 to 8 times a week. But my immune system stays tip top because I get my high doses of spores, and then I take a couple of these other ingredients to help as well.
So that was one of my questions. What do you take daily?
So I would take 4 to 5 Thrive a day.
Okay.
And again, I put my body through a lot of stress. You know, I don't sleep as much as I should, as anyone should. I am just physically and mentally active so much throughout the day. I, of course, are moving through time zones very frequently. I've had weeks where I'm in 4 or 5 different countries in the same week, you know, in places in like Asia, Europe, North America, not like going from France to Germany. I'm going from different continents.
Yeah.
And those kind of things take a toll on your body. And because I have those kind of stresses on my body, I upregulate my system, but I feel the significant protection. You know, I do, the things I do to protect myself is intermittent fasting. I fast every day.
For how long?
A minimum of 16 hours.
Okay.
For example, we got a chance, I was fortunate enough to have dinner with you last night. We started eating around 7:30, 8 o'clock, right? And I don't know what time it is now, but it's probably getting close to noon. I haven't eaten yet. I probably won't eat till probably 2 or 3 o'clock.
I do the same thing. I'll just have lunch.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't eat anything for breakfast. I've even started skipping coffee in the morning because coffee will...
Now you're going over the top.
Now I'm going crazy. I would drink coffee for decades in the morning, you know. But then as you dig more into the benefits of intermittent fasting, there are some benefits that are turned off when you take anything that your liver has to process, you know.
Yeah.
So people used to say you could drink black coffee, or you can drink black coffee with butter in it, and you can't.
So you have coffee, but just not till later.
I have my first cup of coffee usually around 1 or 2.
Got it.
But typically I run well on adrenaline, and my adrenals are functioning well, so I don't necessarily need those other things. But just to maintain my immune system and my gut and not get sick, I keep those things. Most people, if you go on an airplane 2 or 3 times, will get sick. Yeah. You know, I know a lot of our sales reps and all that, if they have a week of a few shows and they're on an airplane 3 or 4 times, they get sick, inevitably. And I'm on an airplane 20 times a month and I don't get sick. Yeah, but I think a lot of it is so that.
You got it figured out. Plus, you probably eat well.
I try to, but you know, 98% of my meals are outside, you know, at restaurants. Yeah. So I try to make the right choices, but I don't refrain from dessert. Yeah. You know, I had dessert last night.
And it was really good.
It was amazingly good. You know, to me, all of this should be about building resilience in your body, right? Because quality of life matters too. What does it matter if you live to 100, but you've lived this really restricted life where you can't enjoy cheesecake every once in a while, you can't have a drink, you can't do these things. It's not like you do it every
day, but once in a while.
Once in a while, you got to be able to have some of these things, right? It's all about quality of life. Like I work with people who are really gluten intolerant, and when they go on vacation, they want to be able to eat bread in Italy, they want to be able to eat bread in France, they want to be able to indulge a little bit. And I'm of the mindset that, you know, if we're here living, we need to indulge a little bit. Yeah. So I try to build forgiveness in my body, which is resilience. And so I eat fairly well. I make pretty good choices, but I will eat, you know, hamburgers and which we know in some places are not the best quality.
Not from
pastured. Exactly. It's not from grass-fed beef and all that stuff. It probably has been cured and has nitrites in it and all that, which is not great for you. Yeah. But again, in very close moderation. But it doesn't wreck me. It doesn't harm me and destroy me. I can do those things here and there and be more resilient because you build in those resilience by those other practices.
And didn't you tell me too that what's awesome about the spores is they enhance the effectiveness of other supplements or that you might be taking, or even other good foods you may be eating, right?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you know, that's the whole saying is you are what you eat. It's really you are what you absorb. Right, so you could be taking all of this, like for example, I tell people greens drinks, right? Greens drinks are great for you. They have lots of good stuff in it, like maybe there's spirulina and kale and all this good stuff. But it doesn't matter if you drink it if you're not able to absorb it because you've got inflammation in your mucosal lining of your gut, right? That stuff isn't getting through. For example, people with celiac disease tend to present with much higher rates of fractures and much higher rates of tooth decay and other issues that are associated with the inability to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And that's because of all the inflammation and enteropathy in their gut. They don't absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And so they have all of these other dysfunctions because of it. So inflammation and disturbance in the gut will negate the absorption of all these nutrients. So if you're leading a healthy lifestyle, like that lady, for example, the example you gave me, that eats really well, you know, does her non-pasteurized, you know, dairy products or milk and all that stuff. Organ meats and all that, but she may just not be absorbing much of that because her gut may be inflamed from stuff that occurred 2 decades ago. You know, so fixing the gut becomes paramount to everything else working the way it should.
So we know that the spores really help to diversify the healthy bacteria in the gut. And so what we've always been taught, through the Western Price Foundation, is that foods like sauerkraut and other fermented foods do that as well. So would you say that they just don't do it as much as the spore probiotic would do?
So it's probably it's probably different how it works. So I could say that there's no clinical evidence that sauerkraut and other fermented foods improve diversity in the microbiome. Right?
No one studied that?
No one's done a study on it, no.
Oh.
Very few things have done studies on looking at the diversity of microbiome. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't. Now, what we do know is that those types of fermented foods are really good for the gut because they provide a lot of really important substrates to the microbiome. They have a lot of anti-inflammatory compounds. They have a lot of nutrients in them. There are pre-digested nutrients that have then now been converted. For example, take carotenoids from a fruit or berry that's in a ferment, and those carotenoids were now converted to something called urolithins, which can be really beneficial to the rest of the gut microbiome. So they are no doubt good for the gut microbiome. We don't know from clinical evidence that they do support diversity.
Which I guess that makes sense, because no one's going to pay for a study because they can't sell,
Right.
like, there's no
sauerkraut companies aren't doing
Yeah.
$1 million clinical trials to figure this stuff out,
sense.
right? So I wouldn't argue, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did improve diversity, and I wouldn't argue, I would be surprised that they're really good for the gut. We know those things. We know they're good for the gut. But to specifically increase diversity in a specific way, because there's lots of studies on the microbiome over the last decade that have shown that diversity using something called a Simpson reciprocal index, okay, which is a measure of the richness and the evenness of the microbes in any given part of the body, in the gut specifically. So you have to look at the richness, meaning how many different bacteria are in that area, and then how even they are. So both have to be true in order to improve diversity where there's a physiological benefit. Now, so far, we're the only ones that have submitted studies for publication showing that a probiotic or any compound does that, improves the Simpson diversity score by over 50% in as little as 3 weeks. Right? So no doubt, I would say take your sauerkrauts, take your fermented foods, which are clearly important for the gut, but likely important in other ways. They reduce inflammation, they do support the growth of other bacteria, but the spores get in there, and what they seem to be able to do is they seem to be able to bring down the growth of overgrown bacteria and increase the growth of undergrown bacteria. That's when we start to see the ability to create evenness in the population and richness in the population as well. So for me, I'm very much dedicated to the scientific process. I don't have an activist mindset with the way I think about food and supplements and medicine and all that. I purely follow the science. So I would say the science is very supportive that fermented foods are really good for your gut. There's plenty of studies that show that, but the spores are the first things that show a significant improvement in diversity. So I would say you need both.
Got it.
And our ancestors got both. They didn't get just one or the other.
Yeah, how did they get the spores? Remind us.
So our ancestors were smart enough to eat dirt, right? So they didn't sterilize their environment. In fact, the way fermented foods came about was that they allowed foods to spoil because it got mixed in with dirt and environment and dust and things like that get in. They didn't have refrigeration and sterilization processes. And it's bacteria in the environment that went in and started fermenting the foods. So they got not only the ferment, but they also ended up picking up the bacteria in their area, in their environment.
So
they got both.
They ate dirt, you mean they probably just didn't clean their vegetables as rigorously as we do? And
nope, they don't. They don't sterilize stuff. They didn't. They didn't do chlorine washes every time they pick vegetables like we do.
Yeah.
They would grab nuts and fruits and all that, and they would maybe brush it off, maybe not, but they certainly didn't sterilize it, and they consumed it right then. We even know that hunter-gatherer tribes that exist today, they follow the same practices that they did for thousands of years, where the moment the hunting group kills an animal, one of the first things they do on site is they cut open the intestinal tract and they eat the contents of the intestines. Right? And those content of the intestines, we don't do that kind of stuff anymore, right? And these are really interesting practices that were developed independently in different parts of the world. Because if you look at the tribes in Papua New Guinea now, they do the same thing, versus the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, they do the same thing. And I know for sure, without an ounce of doubt, out that these tribes didn't send each other emails telling them that this is a cool thing to do, right? And so they developed those techniques independently through a lot of empirical evidence, right? So for thousands of years, they've done that, and they've seen and noticed and measured a health benefit from doing that. It's their tradition. It's their tradition,
what
right?
They did because the people before them did that.
Exactly, and that practice has probably led to enough evidence showing that there is a health benefit. Now, what is it that they get in the intestine of the animal, right? So these are mostly ruminant animals that they're hunting. So these animals are running around, picking up dirt and things like that from all over the place. These animals tend to have huge amounts of microbes, especially environmental microbes, in their intestinal tract. They also have partially fermented foods in their intestinal tract. So they're getting all of their ferments and the probiotics all in one. You know, so and I hear again these kind of debates. It's like the K24, K27 debate. We're all on the same team, right? Our goal is to enhance people's lives and health and wellness. There's no reason you should be choosing between one of the two. You should be getting both. Again, same thing. There's a fermented food camp and a probiotic camp. There's no reason why you should be debating between the two. They're both equally important, and they function differently, right? You should be getting both. I try to get both as much as I can. So it's not one or the other. If we're really following ancestral behaviors, they got both.
Yeah. So eat your good foods, but also
get your probiotics in.
Yeah. So a lot of people say to me, we just can't afford these probiotics. And what I've been telling them, you tell me if this is right, I've been saying what you could do then is take it every other day. If you can't afford it, take it every other day, because taking a really good effective probiotic less often is always going to be better than spending your money and wasting your money on one that doesn't do much and taking more of it.
Yeah.
Is that the advice you would give?
Absolutely accurate. That's the same exact thing I tell people. Even if you have to take it every 3 days, it's still beneficial. It still will help and create effect in the body.
Okay, good.
These bugs hang out in there. They spend time. They multiply. They will do their job. It might take longer to see the same effects, but it's still beneficial. So you can immediately cut the cost by a third by just taking it every other day. Or every 3 days, and it's still beneficial.
Okay. So a good friend of mine, her mom is in the hospital on a vent with sepsis. And so in a case like that, what would be the best way to get the spores into them, and how much, if it was your mom, what would you do?
Yeah, so if it was my mom, number one, I would be a real pain in the ass to the doctors and everyone there. Because I would be talking about we need to upregulate her immune system, her peripheral immune system, right? Because sepsis is a blood infection. That means there is a bacteria or a bacterial component that is all over the body in the circulatory system, causing infection and causing an upregulation. It's a raging infection. And the way your body deals with that is by upregulating macrophages and dendritic cells, which are some of your innate immune responders that go around and actually eat these up, right? So imagine the Pac-Man game, right? You've got Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man. Imagine those are dendritic cells and macrophages, and those little dots that they eat up are the infection. And you've got those dots and infection all over your circulatory system. So you need lots of Pac-Man. And those Pac-Men are actually upregulated and matured, and the energy that they require to do their job is provided for by the gut. It's provided for by butyrate that's being produced in the gut. And if you're not getting adequate amounts of probiotics in, especially probiotics and prebiotics, you're not producing enough butyrate, so your own immune system does not have the capability of fighting that sepsis. Now, the other thing they're probably going through is lots of antibiotics when you have sepsis, right? So antibiotics will then bring down the level of bacteria in the gut, so you produce less butyrate, right? So there's no reason why you can't do both. So if it was my mom in the hospital, I would be there pushing and insisting that she gets her spores and some prebiotics into her feeding tube if she's incapacitated, or through her food, or whatever however they're getting it, nutrients into her system, because we need to make sure we're maintaining the upregulation of the butyrate and the other compounds that are produced by the gut that impact the peripheral immune system.
So you would just open up capsules?
Open up capsules, mix it into
put it in there.
Whatever she's consuming.
How many a day would you give your mom?
I mean, in that stage, I know my mom's history. She's a pretty healthy lady. She doesn't have chronic illness, so she'd probably tolerate 2 to 3 capsules right off the bat.
Yeah.
If it's someone that is really tenuous, has had inflammatory conditions and all, you'd probably want to go slow and start with, you know, half a capsule or quarter capsule to begin with, and then over next week or so.
Because you don't want to give them die off like GI issues when they're already so sick.
Exactly.
So
and in fact, I would even throw in the prebiotic at full dose, even before the probiotic gets to full dose.
Okay.
So, you know, modulate it that way. But again, it's a difficult situation because you kind of have to listen to what's going on in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's restrictions on what you can do. You have to listen to their doctors. You know, but I'm the type where I advocate for myself and my loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, doctors and all that, all as brilliant as they are, as many lives as they save in the hospitals, they don't know everything, right? So if I can intervene and talk to them about stuff I know that they don't know about. There's plenty of stuff they know that I don't know about, but as a collective, if we can figure it out, that's always the best outcome.
Yeah, what's tough is, you know, I think a lot of doctors would listen to you.
Yeah.
I don't think they would listen to me as much as they would listen to you.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to speak as eloquently about
language,
bacteria and all this that you can, you know, so, but I do think that you have to be a squeaky wheel in the hospital and you have to be there, and, you know, I never would leave my loved one in the hospital overnight, especially if they're on a vent. You don't know what they're going to come in and give them, or your kids, they might try to come in and give them vaccines. So yeah, it's important to be, like you said,
you have to be an advocate for yourself. Yeah, you do. And you know, my wife ended up having to have C-sections with both our kids, and so we spent a few days in the hospital, and I was a hawk on stuff, and I picked up a lot of stuff. You know, like I would see her blood ox levels going down that they wouldn't notice, and I go, "What's going on?" You know, we have to, something's different because her blood oxygen levels are going down where they shouldn't be. And then they go, oh yeah, okay, yes, let's adjust these things, and then they adjust it. We even picked up, you know, her pain meds that were on a drip after the C-section was actually dripping behind the equipment. You know, wasn't actually going into the thing, and she was talking about, I'm feeling the pain coming back. I'm like, something's wrong here. I'm looking around and go, wait a minute, it's not even, the tube's not connected correctly. And, you know, so we ring the bell and go, take a look at this tube, something's wrong, you know, and then they go, oh yeah, okay, it's not connected correctly. And that happens,
like, I could tell you a dozen, at least, more stories just like that, because when you're there and you're advocating, you catch that stuff because they're only human, and
absolutely,
you know, shit happens and stuff.
It does, and they're only, and it's not that they don't mean well or anything, they're well-trained professionals and they're there to save lives, but they're human, like you said, and they make mistakes, and they are dealing with 40 other patients, right? I mean, it's hard for them to care as much about your loved one as much as you do, because they have 40 other people they're dealing with. You know, when my dad passed away last year, he was actually in an ICU in a town near Amsterdam. And in their ICU, they have an amazing practice where the nurse that is attending to that patient can only attend to 2 patients in a single shift.
Wow.
Right? That's their law there, which means that nurse gives absolute attention to each of their patients. And my mom, who is a hospitalist that manages ICU patients, she's a medical doctor. Here, she was there as well, of course, and she said that's amazing to see, because in her ICU, she's given maybe 1 or 2 nurses that are managing 16 to 18 patients.
In ICU?
In ICU.
Wow.
Right? So you're running around in between these critically ill patients trying to give as much attention as you can, but that's the way they you know, increase profit and bring down costs, is they're not giving them as much, each patient as much attention as they should deserve.
Right.
So you have to advocate for yourself.